My parents handed my sister $150,000 toward buying a house. Immediately after, they looked at me and declared, "You are a failure." This was not whispered. It was an outright judgment delivered right in the middle of eating pot roast. My sister's husband raised his glass to celebrate. My mother wore a casual smile, as if this judgment was perfectly normal. I still remember dropping my fork. The sound cut through their silence more sharply than words. When I stood up, no one moved to stop me. No one bothered to ask where I was headed. I did not shed any tears that evening. I packed everything I owned into a single trunk. I drove until the highway was completely dark. 2 years later, they discovered the true power of silence, what it can create and what it can ruin. Before I continue, tell me where you are listening from. Knowing I'm not alone helps. When my story is done, please tell me what decision you would have made in my situation. People always claimed our family looked perfect from the outside. We wore coordinated sweaters for Christmas, and we offered polite smiles for the church portraits. Our neighbors certainly thought we were the ideal household. What they never saw was the person who ironed those clothes, who cleaned up the kitchen after those large meals, and who consistently kept quiet to maintain peace. That person was me, Monica. I was the reliable one, the troubleshooter, the person holding everything together behind the scenes. My sister Madeline was the shining star. She earned perfect grades, won the homecoming crown, and received a full scholarship to Stanford. My father always filmed her award ceremonies as though she were a celebrity. When I brought home B's, he simply told me I wasn't putting in enough effort. When I became the art club president, my mother's smile barely reached her eyes. She just commented, "That's sweet." On Madeline's 16th birthday, she received a sparkling blue car topped with a giant bow. My birthday dinner was at Chili's, plus a $75 gift card. "Show some gratitude," my mother instructed while smoothing my hair for a picture. The camera flash caught me blinking. That picture remains displayed on their mantelpiece. It proves I exist, but it doesn't show the reality of that existence. College presented even greater challenges. My sister's education was entirely covered by funding. Mine had zero financial support. When I inquired about assistance, my father sliced the roast beef with the formality of a judge pronouncing a sentence. My mother chimed in softly, "We won't pay for a public university." She added that those schools were for students who lacked high ambition. I absorbed both criticisms without saying a word. I signed the student loan documents by myself. The interest rate was 7.2%. Every dollar felt like a fresh wound. I worked 2 jobs just to survive, the library early mornings and a late-night diner shift. That winter, my hands cracked constantly from the cold. When I contracted pneumonia, I called home, shaking badly. My father told me I needed better management of my time. My mother only asked if I was taking my vitamins. I hung up the phone and stared at the dark screen. Then I heard a knock. Ms. Kim, who lived next door, was standing outside. She held a container of soup and a small paper envelope. "You are not by yourself," she said, gently placing it in my hand. Inside the envelope was a $750 check. It wasn't the amount of money that overwhelmed me. It was the simple kindness. I sobbed until the soup had completely cooled down. From that moment, I began truly recognizing the people who actually showed up for me. Later, a therapist named this behavior protective expectations. I began planning ahead for abandonment, realizing it was necessary for my survival. They failed to attend my graduation ceremony. I watched other families clutch flowers and take pictures. I clutched my diploma and murmured to myself, "Despite everything, I succeeded." I rode the bus home that evening, the certificate still warm inside its cover. My phone vibrated with a new picture of Madeline. Her engagement ring sparkled beneath string lights. The attached caption claimed, "This is what dreams are made of." I tapped the like button, then immediately disabled my notifications. Deep down, I was aware that dreams were achievable, just not the life they had envisioned for me. Following graduation, my life became quieter, but this quiet was unsettling, not calming. The heavy silence felt like a surviving structure after a complete burn. I rented a studio apartment situated over a laundry business. The constant drone of the machines substituted human interaction. I spent long days working as a low-level designer, carefully setting aside every single paycheck as proof I was fine without their involvement. I constantly assured myself that I was okay, self-sufficient, and unaffected. Still, I sometimes woke up at 3 a.m. I would see my phone screen lit up on the bedside table and scroll through their pictures. Family Sunday meals, Madeline's bridal event, and trips I missed out on. Their happy expressions seemed fixed. My absence from those events appeared deliberate. When the actual wedding invitation showed up, it did not come directly from my family. An automated, polite email arrived from the coordinator instead, featuring gold script that formally said, "We cordially invite you." My own name was misspelled. I focused on the screen for 60 seconds before shutting down my computer. I scheduled my initial therapy appointment that very night. Dr. Hayes had comforting eyes and a voice that sounded peaceful and flowing. She listened patiently while I explained my family dynamic, how love was always conditional, and how their approval was like air I had to struggle for. After I finished talking, she posed a single question. Had I ever tried not working so hard to get it? I brought that statement back to my apartment. It resonated while I folded clothes, cleaned my teeth, and watched the blinking light indicating a message. My mother's voice played aloud. "Please call us, dear. Stop being difficult." I ignored the request. The days quickly transitioned into weeks. My phone flashed reminders from Dr. Hayes. A boundary is not a barrier. It is a door that remains under your supervision. I started practicing the word no while looking in the mirror. It felt clumsy initially, but soon became firm. That single word felt unfamiliar and nearly risky. When the holidays arrived, I sent 0 gifts and 0 messages. The first day brought guilt, but the second felt easier. By the third day, I felt able to breathe without needing their approval. Madeline got married, and I was not there. Social media was instantly flooded with pictures, her lace dress, our beaming parents, captioned with the words, "Our family is eternal." I looked at the images from my small outdoor balcony, the sounds of the city rising up below me. I noticed a bee circling a nearly dead potted plant on the railing. I realized, even insects understand where they shouldn't settle. The following week, my mother left another voice message. "You are complicating this situation unnecessarily." I erased the message instantly, without hearing the entire thing. That evening, I disabled my phone's ringer, sat beside the window, and allowed the resulting silence to take up the room they previously controlled. Therefore, I ceased all contact. There were no calls, no messages, and no justifications provided. Silence became the way I communicated. It was calculated, rigid, and intentional. At the time, I didn't recognize that this very silence would become the most powerful thing I would ever construct. The silence I created didn't solve everything instantly, but it gave me a vantage point to spot the flaws. When their voices were no longer dominating my thoughts, I finally began to hear my own. My work life settled into a reliable routine. My days blurred together with design drafts, client deadlines, and late-night caffeine. I wasn't exactly thriving, but I definitely wasn't collapsing either. With every completed client assignment, another bill was covered, solidifying the evidence that I could manage without their permission. Even so, the deep sadness remained. Every public holiday felt like standing outside a brightly lit window, watching a warmth I felt undeserving of. One February, I got sick with pneumonia again. I vividly recall the sterile light of the emergency clinic and the repetitive sound of monitoring equipment. Lying there shivering, I scrolled through my phone, pausing right over my mother's contact information. My thumb stopped just before placing the call. I powered off the screen. I didn't need to experience yet another disappointment. When I returned to my apartment, I found a note stuck to my door. There was soup inside. P. Kim. Ms. Kim, my old next-door neighbor, had somehow tracked me down again. She handed me a thermal container and instructed, "Just rest. Everything else can wait." Her simple kindness affected me more profoundly than any apology I had ever wished for. By the time spring arrived, I was fully recovered and restless for change. I craved a life that wasn't about simply waiting for the next bad thing. Therapy helped me put a name to this feeling. I was completely exhausted from merely surviving. I wanted to actively build something. I started researching real estate listings, affordable acreage up in the Hudson Valley, far enough away that I could hear myself think clearly. It was the kind of location people usually drove past, unable to recognize its potential. The sort of place that no one could ever take away from me. 3 months later, I signed the purchasing documents for 40 acres of neglected soil and a dilapidated structure with more broken areas than intact windows. Anyone else would have called it a total disaster. I saw pure potential. The first few nights were intensely difficult. There was no heating, no reliable internet, only the wind rattling the exterior walls and my frustration aimed at leaking pipes. But for the first time, every single problem was my problem to fix. I taught myself to seal air leaks using plastic sheeting. I learned to patch drywall by watching online videos. I figured out how to keep the bee colonies alive during the cold weather. Ben, my neighbor living across the ridge, appeared one morning, bringing coffee and a genuine smile. "Are you making the land work, or is it working you?" he asked. I hadn't genuinely laughed in months. Weekends quickly turned into a fixed schedule. My hands were covered in mud, my hair full of sawdust, and my neck sunburned. Slowly, rows of lavender started emerging in the backfield, shy green shoots pushing through the difficult earth. I began keeping detailed notebooks, recording every single error and every successful flower bloom. The pages accumulated, serving as concrete evidence of my fresh start. One evening, I stood in the entrance of the partially renovated farmhouse, observing the fields beneath a full moon. My breath misted in the cold, but I felt a sense of inner peace. For years, I had desperately sought acceptance. Now I was establishing it using my own hands. As the inaugural season passed, I understood that I hadn't simply gone quiet. I had attained true sovereignty. Spring arrived earlier that year. The lavender had begun its blooming cycle in expansive, uneven rows. The soft purple brushed gently in the wind. I noticed the quiet had changed. It felt earned now, not just vacant. The bees were loyal and active, and I worked near them in the planting areas. I did not know this peace was about to be broken. It began with a text from an unlisted number. "Monica, is that location really yours?" I did not reply. 2 hours later, the phone rang. It was my father's number. I waited long enough for his message to start recording. His voice sounded too casual, almost slick. "Your sister drove past a property in the Hudson Valley today. Large field, metal roof, lots of lavender. Do you own it?" I cleaned the soil off my hand, looking toward the open space. "I do," I told him when I finally returned his call. He paused, clearly searching for the right words. "It looks good," he admitted. "We did not know you were doing so well. Maybe we should help you grow it bigger. I have access to investors." I cut him off. "No, Dad, you missed your opportunity." He chuckled once, sounding patronizing. "Do not be difficult. We are your family." That word family felt heavy. "Family does not call you a failure and finance someone else," I said softly. I ended the call before he could respond. 2 days passed. An email arrived with the subject, investment proposal. I did not open it. I moved it to the archive instead. A week went by and the lavender continued its growth undisturbed. Then a courier van arrived on the dirt road, kicking up dust. The driver needed my signature on a large envelope. Inside was a personal check for $150,000. The memo line read, "For your college." It included a short message in my mother's handwriting. "We treated you too harshly. This is our attempt to correct things." I sat with it for 10 minutes. I felt quiet, not emotional. Then I stood, found scissors, and cut the check into fine strips. I put the pieces into a different envelope. I wrote one sentence in blue ink: "Forgiveness cannot be purchased." I sent the envelope back using certified mail. 3 days later, my father appeared at my front gate. The cameras caught him first. Neat khakis, polished shoes, and his prepared look for the weekend. He waved at the camera as if I were still waiting for his approval. I pressed the intercom. "Leave," I instructed. "I only need 5 minutes," he replied. His voice cracked slightly. "I was wrong, Monica. I want to discuss this." "You had 26 years to talk," I answered. "You used that time badly." He tried his old authority again. We are your parents. We made errors, but parents are entitled to access. I almost laughed. Access is earned, not assumed, and it is certainly not bought. The silence that followed was immense. Can we just move past this? You can move without involving me. He looked straight into the lens, his eyes tired. He begged for something he could not name. Forgive us, he whispered. I can do that, I said, keeping my voice steady. But forgiveness is separate from reconciliation. The gate motor started. It closed slowly, mechanical, and final. He stayed until the metal panels met, blocking the view. The camera light stopped flashing. I recorded the visit in a logbook, time, date, weather. Documentation serves better than memory when issues return. I then returned to the fields. Work provided more stability than memories ever could. That evening, I watched the footage. I saw his uncertain posture without his usual power. I saw that I did not react. I learned a lesson better than any therapist taught me. Peace is not achieved by receiving apologies. It is secured by protecting boundaries. A week later, a second envelope came. No note was included, just the same check amount marked as void. A possible sign of guilt or surrender. I shredded it immediately. The season advanced. The lavender deepened in color. The number of bees grew and the land stopped feeling temporary. One morning, while checking the hives, I saw Madeline's car idling far down the road. She did not enter the gate. She just stayed seated. Her face looked distant behind the glass. She held her phone, maybe taking a picture for our parents to prove I was still alive outside their world. I did not acknowledge her. I did not move. I let her look as long as she wished. That afternoon, my father called again. Your sister says the property appraisal is over $2.5 million. Is that accurate? That is the amount listed, I confirmed. He fell silent. I could hear his breathing change. Then came the usual shift, the sales pitch disguised as care. You built something amazing, but you cannot handle that scale alone. Let us help you grow it. You require expertise, real guidance this time. I recalled every single lecture, every refusal of money, every smirk at my efforts. I remembered the girl who wanted their acceptance. Then I delivered the answer, simple and absolute. No. Monica, no is a complete statement, I said, recalling Dr. Hayes's training. For the first time, the word had no guilt, only finality. When I ended the call, the fields buzzed with life. The scent of lavender entered the open windows. Outside the gate, a car engine started and then vanished into the distance. That night, I walked the entire perimeter of the land, using a flashlight, following the fence line I had constructed myself. Each post was solid, each wire tight. The boundaries, physical and otherwise, were holding. They had labeled me a failure, but failure had created something more lasting than their validation. 2 years of silence had resulted in soil, roots, and blooms. As the moonlight covered the fields, I realized they were right about one thing. I was no longer part of their world. I had built my own. Summer arrived hot and complete. The heat settled over everything. The lavender grew tall and fragrant. Harvest week began and the fields were busy. Sarah and Liam cut the stems, their laughter filling the spaces. Their happiness replaced my old feelings of guilt. We packed boxes until late evening. The barn doors stayed open, cicadas loud in the trees. The first major delivery, a steady 6-figure amount, shipped at dawn. I watched the truck leave the dirt road and felt a profound release inside me. For the first time in my life, everything supporting me was something I constructed. I sent appreciation packages to everyone who had shown support. Ms. Kim, Dr. Hayes, even Ben, who now helped with the irrigation. Each box contained a simple note. Thank you for being there when you didn't have to be. One morning, I found an old photo in a book, a family picture with all of us smiling perfectly. I looked at my younger self on the frame's edge and whispered, "You got out!" The farm was alive outside, real and honest. The gate remained closed, but my life had never been more open. They gave my sister a house. I built an entire life. True peace was the only legacy I required. They called it defiance. I called it healing. If you have ever prioritized peace over seeking permission, you will understand my actions. There are other stories like mine about family betrayal and silent forms of revenge. Continue watching the playlist. You are not alone.